Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 381. Today we're going to talk about Specter Ops. This is a new release from Plaid Hat Games, and if you pre-ordered it, you probably have it like I do. If you ordered it from online store or waiting for your local game store to have it, you're probably waiting a little bit at the time of this recording, but it should be out relatively soon. Now what this is a game sort of in the vein of Scotland Yard, if you've heard of that, or Fury of Dracula, Letters from Whitechapel, and there's a couple of games where one player is trying to be elusive and not be captured, and then the other players act as a team to work together to try to capture, or in this case, damage or kill the agent, as it were. So I'm a big fan of Scotland Yard, huge fan of Scotland Yard. Played it a bunch when I was a kid and played it some years ago again several times, and we had a great time with it. So this is very much in that vein, but it's sort of like if you think of Scotland Yard with an Ameritrash feel. I mean, you can kind of tell from the cover there, you've got a werewolf and sort of a little puppeteer kind of guy and different sort of reaver types of folks if you read the X-Men at all. And so it's got that same vibe of trying to capture the agent. The hunters are trying to capture the agent, but there's special player powers and different equipment and all kinds of stuff. And it scales actually quite a bit differently across the player count. So let's take a look at how it works, and I'll come back and tell you what I think. Okay, so here you can see most of the components that you're going to get in the game. You've got this large player board. If we take a zoom in here, you can see there are several coordinate spaces on the board. So players will be moving sort of from grid to grid along these spaces, and you can see there's actually a large road that goes through the board itself. So there's going to be kind of little alleyways that players will be sneaking around, and then a large road that players will be driving this car in. So this token here represents a car that the hunters will be using to track down the agent. So here is the car represented off the board, and depending on the number of players, you're going to have a different number of hunters in the game. There's always going to be one agent, and if you're playing two players, you'll have one player controlling two of the hunters. If you have a third player, then each player will control a separate hunter. And then you'll have a fourth player. The agent itself will get a little bit of health. I'll talk to you about that in a second. And then if you add a fifth player, you'll add a fourth agent, but one of these is going to be a traitor. So when you play with five, and this is pretty cool actually, the agent will take and shuffle up or do whatever they want and sort of mix these up, and then they're going to hand out, and they're going to know who they're giving this traitor card to. And so you can do that however you want, but the agent and the traitor hunter are going to know who each other is. So that is how the game is set up in regards to that. And if we take a look here, we can see these have special player cards that represent each thing. So if you take the beast miniature, and let's take a close look of the miniature there, these are pretty nice looking. You're going to take the miniature card, and he's got some special abilities that he'll use, and there's one of these cards for each of these hunters. Now there are also a choice of agents that the agent can pick from, and we can see again these have different miniatures that represent the player. Now these aren't always going to be on the board because a lot of the times the agent himself is going to be hidden, and again there is a special ability that each of the agents has, so you can choose and pick these. Now the players won't know who you actually choose until they see you for the first time, and then you'll reveal who you are and what your possible abilities are. Now there are also a stack of these equipment cards, and the agent will choose 3 of these to start the game, and you can see some of these are represented by a portrait icon, and that means that you have to actually be using this particular agent in this case here to throw that into one of your 3 possible equipments that you might have. And again, the players will not know what you're capable of in terms of the equipment, but this is going to be kind of part of the game, is learning what the possibilities are for the hunter, or excuse me, the agent to actually be doing. And you can actually see here these little tokens here will tell you how many times you can actually use that ability per game. And sometimes you'll use an ability and you won't really tell the players. You'll mark it down on a sheet, but they won't even know that you've used an ability. Other times you might reveal this. Other times you might just kind of tap it, and then that will let them know you did something, but they're not really sure. So if you can see way up there at the top, the agent is always going to come in there and start the game there, and depending on the number of players, the vehicle is going to start in one of two possible spots down here. Now the turn goes as follows. The agent takes their turn, followed by the hunters all taking their turn in whatever order they wish, and then repeating. Now let's take a look at the agent's special hidden sheet here to figure out what the object of the game is. Now of course the agents will want to keep this hidden. We just use actually the box cover. That works pretty well, and you're going to go ahead and write down which agent you are, and you have a certain amount of health. So one of the agents has extra toughness, so most times you'll have 4 hit points, but if you're using the big hulking beast of a agent, you'll get extra 2, and then only in the 4-player game you're going to get an extra 2 on top of that, just because you're kind of outnumbered. And in a 5-player game you have the trader kind of working for you, so you don't actually get the bonus there. So you can see here's a representation of the board, and the first thing to note as the agent is you've got 4 general locations. So you can see this is 1, and then here's the 4s, down here's some 3s, and then some 2s. So you're actually going to roll the dice 4 times. So let's roll that. So we rolled a 5, and that means our first objective, or one of our objectives, is going to be here at F11. So if we look on the board here, F11 is way up here. So if we take a look there, we can see, just move that a little bit there, you'll actually go ahead and put a objective token on that spot. Now, that's if you're playing with less players. If you're playing with more players, you're just actually going to mark it on this sheet, and the hunters won't know exactly where you're going, but they're going to be able to look at, you know, one of these sheets and say, okay, well, it could be one of these possible spaces here. But with less players, you actually kind of reveal your intentions, so they know that you have to go to this spot. And what you're trying to do is go next to this spot here, and then at the start of your following turn, you'll be able to reveal that you've captured one of your objectives. Now, there are 4 possible objectives, because you're going to roll the dice 4 times, 1 for each sort of sector or quadrant. And you need to capture 3 of the 4 and then escape out the board. So if we take a look up here, you can see there's an exit there that you can get out. The spot that you actually came in, you can get out. And then with more players, you'll actually mark this spot here with an exit token, and so you get another opportunity, so they can't just fully block you. So if you look here, you actually have 40 turns, in which case to try to complete your objective. So you're always going to start here in N1, so the players know that. And then you can move up to 4 spaces, and this is used to pad, to kind of draw. You can move diagonally. So if I was starting here in N1, I could theoretically move here, down to L2, down to K3, and then down to J4, because that, you know, you can move diagonally. So you can move 1 to 4 spaces. Now the thing to keep in mind is if you move more than 2 spaces, then you have this little compass there, and players have an ability that they can activate with the vehicle. If you've moved so many spaces, this is sort of like a motion detector radar, and you have to say in proximity to where the vehicle is, are you northeast, northwest, and they can kind of zero in on you that way. Now, if there's a trader in the midst, you can always lie to the trader, so just kind of keep that in mind. And I'll make a quick kind of, I don't know, I guess component note. You've got to download the FAQ, check out Board Game Geek, because especially with the trader mode, there are some things that are just not covered very clearly in the rule book. I would say outside of the trader mode, everything's covered pretty good. But there's just some weird interactions that you really need to be clarified, and they're definitely going to come up. So before you play 5-player, unless you want to spend all your time Googling BGG on your phone, then I would say take a look at all that stuff. So you'll very simply move where you're supposed to move, and then write the hex or this grid space that you're on at the end of the turn. And then if you did use one of your special abilities, you'll go ahead and denote that to the right here. Now at the end of the agent's movement, you're going to do a quick audit and see if any of the hunters would have seen you. So let's say I had started here, and I'm just putting the figure there to make it more easy to represent to you where I'm going. So if I had somehow, let's say I'd moved here and here, I'd mark on my sheet that I was at 017, and then I would have to put my figure, because I'm definitely in the line of sight of the werewolf character there. But let's say I wasn't a complete idiot, and so I moved like 1, 2, 3, like so. Now line of sight is always in a straight line, so even though it kind of looks like you'd be able to see them, just imagine there's like little nooks and crannies and alleys that you could hide in. So what I would show though is I have this last scene marker here, and I would show that as that I had passed through there, and the wolf knew that I was there, and they would kind of try to guess, okay, could they be here? Could they be here? Could they be there? They could be anywhere. So that would be the spot that they caught a glimpse of you, but they don't actually see where you're at exactly. So after the agent's done their turn, all the hunters will go, and they can go in any order that they want. They can also move up 4 spaces. Now, for example, the werewolf character here, he's got some special abilities. He can actually move up to 5 spaces, or if he moves less, then he can actually do a sort of a sniffing thing. And so the agent will have to tell them if they're within 4 spaces of the werewolf. They say, okay, yes, I am close. So you don't know quite which direction necessarily, but he's got that cool special ability. I mean, each of the agents, the hunters have different special abilities. Like the rifle person here, they can actually sort of fix their vision down one sort of line, which means they don't see down the other lines that they could be looking through. But if you somehow move anywhere in their line of sight, they would instantly do 1 damage to you because they're kind of trained with their rifle down the line there. So everybody's special abilities is really going to come into play. I mean, not just the agent, but the hunters as well. So after these players have moved, then we'll go into the next round. Now, the couple things that you can do is you can actually move the car. Now, if you're in the car, so if we take a look over here and you're one of these 2 agents over there, you can actually move the car a certain number of spaces. The car has a total movement allowance of 10, and it has to stay on this road area. It can't go into these alleys. And one player could move it 3, and then another player could move it a few spaces or something on their turn. But the thing that you'll mostly do is actually either move it or activate it, like I said, for its motion detector here. So let's say the car was here, okay, and then somebody had activated the motion detector, and I was the agent, and I had let's say we didn't know that where I was here, but I was somewhere down here, and then you activate that, and I had moved 3 or more spaces on my turn, and then I would say I am southeast, or excuse me, I would be southeast of this, but you do it in relationship to the car. So this would actually be, let's say I was here, that would actually be directly north, but typically you'll kind of be off to the side. So I would say maybe if I was here, I was northeast to the car. Now you can actually still say that, and this is actually very important, if you moved less than 3 spaces. Now you can't lie unless the player activating it was a traitor, but it can be very tricky, and I kind of hosed myself up in the first 5-player game we played of this, where I thought I couldn't say my direction if I moved less than 3 spaces, and they were like, oh, well, he only moved 2 spaces because he said he couldn't say. That's not clear in the rule book at all, but if you look at the FAQ and stuff. So I didn't lose on that turn. It was several turns later, but it was, that's just, like I said, you got to go into the FAQ and look up some of that stuff, and then the game is going to work beautiful. So again, that's a very simple game. The agent's going to move around, maybe do a special ability or something, and then the hunters will move around, do some special abilities. And if you get close to a spot where your objective is, and let's just pick a random hex there. Let's say that was there, and then if you are actually next to it on your turn, at the start of your turn, you'll flip it up and show that you activate it. Now again, with more players, this action won't even be on the board. You'll just go ahead and mark it and say, oh, I activated this. And some agents have special abilities. Actually, this agent, she can be more than 1 space away, and then she can activate it, so that makes it a little trickier to find her. So the special abilities are really a huge part of the game, and they're going to keep it kind of fresh. Because again, you're not going to know at the beginning which agent they picked and which special equipment and stuff they picked either. I should talk very briefly about attacking. If you ever land right on the agent, they're going to immediately take a damage. If you're within a certain number of spaces, you're going to roll a die, and you're going to try to hit them. Now the rifleman here can actually roll 2 dice at once and do that. Now 1 is always a miss. So even if you're within 1 space and you roll a 1, that's still a miss, because a 1's always a miss. But normally you just have to roll the difference there or more, and then you'll hit the agent and they'll take a hit point. Now the agent can actually do stun damage to them. There's these little stun markers that you'll put on the card. Basically making them waste their next turn or the rest of their current turn based on, depending on the ability and whatever you use. The cool thing about the traitor, I should say, is once they're revealed, then they'll actually take a sheet of their own and take one of the agent cards and sort of become that agent instead, and they move around. Now they can't complete the objectives on the board, but they have to escape and live through all the turns, and both agents have to escape with 3 of the 4 objectives. But they're cool because they kind of, they'll throw some like diversionary tactics or go and work on stunning agents and things, or excuse me, hunters and stuff like that. Now it would be possible for the traitor to remain hidden the entire game, but the typical way that they'll become revealed is, let's say this was the traitor here, and I had moved through here, and they don't have to say anything, because remember, you can lie to the traitor, or basically to the group through the traitor. So normally if I was here, I would have to show myself. And she's like, nope, I don't see anything, right? And so then if this guy comes out, let's say this way, and then I would have to show myself, then you would say, wait a minute, you should have said that you were the traitor. And that's the instant where, okay, you've obviously outed the traitor because they didn't reveal, and then this person at that point would then take the sheep. But it's not necessarily possible that that will always happen. Okay, so what do I think of the game? Well, I love it. Now, like I said at the beginning, I really enjoy Scotland Yard and I have for a long time, and I haven't really ever found a game to replace it for me, to be honest with you. And I haven't played Fury of Dracula, but from what I understand, it takes like 4 or 5 hours, and it's pretty crazy, and probably needs like a redoing or reworking at this point, but I don't know, I haven't played it. I didn't really care for Letters of Whitechapel, because to me it was like the same game, but over and over and over again with like 5 different versions of the thing. Like you were looking for the clues, and then the hideout, and then Jack, and so like, okay, the same game, and really bogged down in a lot of extra AP, which these games just do in general, because you're really piecing together routes and trying to take your best guess, and then you're going to have somebody that is like, well, I think he went here, and really it could have been any of the 3 spots that you might be zeroed in on. And you know, so you might have some push and pull and sort of alpha player on the hunter side, a little bit of an issue. But this is cool because it changes up. Now, the problem with Scotland Yard and Letters of Whitechapel is it plays the exact same way when you have 2 players or 5. It's just a bunch of people sitting around, you know, sort of collectively using their brain power against one person, and you should really control all of the characters. But this actually scales to play very differently at the different player count. So like the 2 player, you just take the 2, and then the agent themselves actually sort of reveals a little bit where their objectives actually are, whereas you add more players, the agent gets some more hit points, or they have a traitor, or you don't actually reveal where the objectives are specifically. You just kind of know the general idea. And then the whole change up in the different player abilities and the equipments and everything, and that's really what it boils down to. And that really changes the deduction aspect of the game, because now you have more to consider. Like if you take the werewolf out, that's one less thing to consider in terms of proximity to them, or you can use the proximity as a way to bluff the players as well. And then, like I said, with the traitor, that adds a whole nother dimension. And the other thing that's cool about it is a lot of these style games is that, you know, you find Jack, or in this case the agent, and then that's it, the game's over. But this has this awesome part where you've got hit points, and it's so, you know, it doesn't seem like it would be that big of a deal, but it is, because you'll have those narrow escapes, and like you'll just had him and then he gets away. Now you can have that in the other games, but it's sort of like retroactively, where it's like he revealed himself at a certain point and then you've got to chase him down. But this, like, you had him in your clutches and you did a little bit of damage, and then the agent will play an equipment to make a sneak attack or sneak away and get, you know, 6 spaces away or move right in front of your face, and you don't even know what he did, because you're like, and you don't even know that he activated the equipment. So that's awesome. And like the hairs on my arms stand up when I think about that kind of stuff, because that adds the drama and adds a little bit more narrative story and arc to the game than in the other style of games, where it's sort of like you go along and you sort of punch your time card at the points when you reveal. Whereas this is, you know, you're slowly ticking down. You have those objectives as the agent. You're not just trying to run away the entire game. You've got to literally go in and get stuff. And that's something that Whitechapel did have, where you were going and trying to, you know, commit your nasty murder. In this case, you're just kind of going and flipping these random objectives. And I like that you only have to do 3 of the 4 and stuff. So this is a good price point. There's not a lot of components in here, but there's a lot of game, and it's going to add some replay value. And like I said, you can play at the different player counts, and it's going to be a different experience when you do that. So I would highly recommend this game. Awesome game. Very much going to replace Scotland Yard for me. And I think probably this is the go-to game of this style, because the play time is going to be around 2 hours, probably. You know, probably based on player count. With 2, it's going to be less, but, you know, I would see 5 players we played, I would say it was about 2.5, and that was with a rules explanation. I don't remember exactly, because some other people showed up. and we were kind of trying to pressure ourselves. But so it's not going to go super long though. It's not going to go over 3, I don't think, at all. But so I would say this is, you got the variety experience, the different player abilities, you know, the different player counts, and it's going to play in a reasonable time frame. You're not going to expect a half an hour. Well, you could lose the game in half an hour. I mean, that can happen, but it's going to be a reasonable time frame. So anyway, take a look at it. Specter Ops. Thanks.